under 30 have never really seen government do anything that's really, really meaningful for them. The big things that Canadians care about, like healthcare, that all happened in their parents' generation, and so you've got this kind of challenge, like you were saying, people don't really believe that politics can actually do anything useful for them. So we've got to get to a stage where we can inspire people, convince them that there is actually a better path forward for the country, and try and mobilize them to vote on the backs of that. I suspect that you have tons more knowledge about how to actually do that on the ground than I do, because that's not what I do, and I have very little experience going door to door, so I would love to talk to you more about what you found has worked and what hasn't, as we're trying to put this together. Because we know that it won't necessarily be that everywhere, but in certain communities, actually just going and trying to reach the people that don't vote could be the winning factor.
Climate change might be something that would help, because when I go on these rallies concerning climate change, Line 9, it's pretty well all young people. And these people really care. So I think, despite what you're saying, these people could be the ones who will actually vote if you can ignite their interest beyond climate change into changing the government.
I mean, I think my current thinking around this is, looking at what happened in Quebec with the student strike, voter turnout during that election increased a lot. And it wasn't because people wanted Charest out or Mavois in. It was because the electoral system was suddenly relevant to a group of people who were mobilized around an issue. So I think I take your point that the issue is very important, and we're thinking very seriously about how to do it from both ends. It's not about convincing people that the electoral system is relevant to them. Like, we have to make it relevant.
Yeah, I'm wondering just how far through you've thought this strategic voting thing. You talk about, the Harper Tories, or not Tories, conservatives, most of them are reform people, but you got the Harper group on the one side, and you talk about the other three parties, the progressive parties. So I'm thinking actually about the Liberal Party here, which is a party that, is very progressive when they're in opposition or when they're running for election, but as soon as they get into power, they implement the policies of the Conservative Party. I'm just wondering what mechanisms you are thinking of to hold these politicians' feet to the fire once they get in. If the vote is divided strategically, and certain politicians, Liberal Party politicians, some NDP Party politicians as well, if they get into power, what mechanisms are you thinking could be put in place to make sure that they actually, enact progressive measures?
I think that's why this piece is really important, and I'll let you respond with what we do.
Yeah, I wish that for the last almost 3 years of organising Elite Now, we'd had a minority government. In a minority government situation, Canadians actually have a lot more power because the parties are always vulnerable. And I think the most likely outcome, well, there's various things that could happen in the next election. Harper would win another majority. I'm hoping we can avoid that. He could win a minority, in which case maybe we can get the Liberals and the NDP to...
and the Greens.
And the Greens to form a maybe, who knows, in an outside shot, maybe there's an NDP or a Liberal minority. But in any of those cases, it's very, very likely that we'll have more than one of the not conservative parties, not progressive parties in power. So my hope is that we can continue using this very effective online organising and campaigning to not only give us the base that we need to shift the next election, but also to then organise after the election to do exactly what you said, which is hold politics to the fire, make sure that we actually start making progress on these issues. We're thinking about, we did this a bit before the last election, but one thing that we're thinking about is can we sort of come up with our demands for what we want to see a new government implement, not wait for the parties to tell us what they want to do, but actually get Canadians together to figure out what our agenda is, and then after the election say, okay, we did all this work to get you guys elected, now you've got to implement these policies that Canadians want to see happen, and it's going to be on us to hold them accountable. It's going to be hard work, but we have to. It doesn't end on election day, and it doesn't end with this government. It's about how we can start moving things in the right direction so that we can make a big difference.
So you are thinking past the end of the
absolutely that. we've got sort of ideas for where we could go as a country, and I'm sure if we went around the room, things like sort of moving off fossil fuels, if we had even an NDP majority government in the next election, would that be part of their platform? No. Is that where we need to go? Is that the reality of climate change? Yes. So we have to go much beyond just this next election, but we do have to organise an election in order for us to get there.
I just wanted to comment that, like, if we can increase the voter turnout to start with, like, say for example, like, you get a riding that has 50% turnout out to like an 80% turnout, then you don't think that the numbers would kind of convince the winner, I guess, that riding to either follow through and like make them think that there's that many more people they have to please in order to win again. You know what I mean? Like, just the sheer numbers, you could kind of keep them accountable as just on that basis.
I'd like to think so. I think even in writings, even if you could do that and getting from 50% to 80% turnout would be a miracle. I think you've still got to be there. You've still got to be following through. You've still got to be making sure that they actually implement the policies that we want.
The mentality is let me win, worry about tomorrow later. That's what they do. And if you're running with the 40%, you're toast. And because you're going to split the votes all the way down the middle, chances are the Conservatives will want it again, even if it's a minority, like you said. So you've got to get that vote up. I tell people, vote for your Senator Sam, at least get out there and vote. And then when you go to the polls, vote. Have a reason to get out.
I couldn't agree more. And part of the problem, like I said at the start, is our electoral system. We know that our community and Canadians as a whole want to see the voting system change. It delivers results that commit us in the extreme. And one of my big hopes is that if we can get the government to shift in the next election and get the new government to implement a different voting system, so that we don't have to face this kind of rubbish about strategic voting ever again. Yeah, right at the back.
Okay, I think one of the problems that we have is that we all seem to follow our own tribes and with our own interest group. And I think that what we need to do, when I look around the room, I see people, baby boomers. Okay, so we are the elders of the 21st century. And we're probably the first generation in the history of the world that is not giving our children a better world than the one we inherited. So, and where I work, it's mostly young people. Okay, and number 15, 14 people ahead of me are about 20 to 24 years of age. And they keenly feel that we screwed up. Okay? And I think what we need to do is speak loud and long that we, as elders, every decision that we make has to take into consideration every generation, and that we care about what happens to them. And I think that that's a form of a covenant. Instead of worrying about whether we're going to be taken care of in old age, if we take care of them, we can be confident that they will be generous to us in return. So I think that's the approach that old people like myself need to do when we join groups like this. We need to be very generous in supporting young people. I'm going to be part of that thing to raise the minimum wage to the age of $14 an hour. If more old heads were seen instead of just the university students, I think that might demonstrate to them that we care about what's going to happen for future generations. And thank you.
A couple of comments. I think that when you use the language progressive parties, I think it's probably in quotes, but I think it's a mistake not to always mention the Green Party, because I think of the parties, the Green Party is the only one that's doing anything. Elizabeth May is doing more than the whole rest of the Parliament. And one of the things I would hate to see, if anything like strategic voting happens, is that they lose seats. I have no idea what kind of strategy to have, but they should not lose, they should gain. I don't know how we get there.
Well, it would be unfair for them to lose. In fact, if the Greens voted all across the country were concentrated in certain ridings, the Greens would, I think, have 4 seats at the moment. So the Greens are disproportionately affected by the current voting system,
Yeah,
worse than any of the other parties.
And they would be in strategic voting too, unless you can
Depends how
figure
it's
out
done.
something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
We want to be really careful. I mean, we're independent. We're not working with any of the parties. I would love to see the Greens have more seats in Parliament because they deserve it, and I think we've seen over the last little while that Elizabeth has done a fantastic job of holding the Conservatives accountable. We're being quite strategic in terms of like trying to figure out which ridings we go into and where. I can't imagine Elizabeth won't re-win her seat in Saanich Highlands. The question for me actually, which is more interesting about the Greens and the role that they could play, is that in terms of cooperation, the Greens are actually the only party that have that policy. So the Greens have a policy that they are willing to cooperate with other parties where it makes sense to do so. So they actually have a bit of a stick against the Liberals and the NDP in a way that other parties don't. And it could be interesting to see, is there a possibility of the Greens, let's say there was a riding where the Greens vote was a few percent, but that was also the margin of victory. Could the Greens say, okay, we'll not run a candidate in that riding if you NDP and Liberals will cooperate in this other riding? So I actually think there might be a bit of a mechanism there. We've got to see what might be possible in its early days.
I was here. I'm green. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't include your greens in your liberal NDP alliance, where do you think all the disgruntled liberals in NDP will go? They won't go to the Conservatives. They'll go to the Greens. So you better get the Greens on your side, or they're going to take 15% of the vote.
I think you misunderstood. I don't think I ever implied that if there was a coalition.
No, but everybody here never says Greens. You know, and we get anywhere from 3 to 5 to 8% of the vote, depending on the election.
I'll say green. Green's a great word.
It's not partisan.
In the last little while, the Progressive Conservative Party has spent a bit of time number crunching and looking at our ridings and the boundaries.
Ontario provincial.
Federally.
There is a Progressive Conservative Party that was killed.
Oh, conservative.
That's fine.
Has the redrawing of boundaries come into any of your thoughts in terms of voter turnout? Because they've done that on purpose. You have to respond to that, not just the old ways of thinking.
It's interesting. We've got someone who's done a lot of some in-depth analysis on that. It's complicated. Essentially, what he had to do was take all the existing data from the ridings, break it down into polling divisions, and then with the new maps, figure out, okay, what will happen if the people had voted the same way last time with these new boundaries. There's actually not very many instances where it looks like there's been gerrymandering. I think the Independent Commission has actually done a fairly good job of kind of resisting that. What I will say is that it's created some really, really interesting opportunities. There's areas like some of the urban areas in Saskatchewan and Saskatoon and Regina where they were Conservative strongholds before, and it now looks like they may not be. So there's some opportunities that have arisen there. It's made our job as organisers that want to do this really serious work a lot harder because we're trying to use old data and new maps, but we are looking at that quite carefully until we try and figure out where the best place is going to come. How many folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet?
I wanted to support the other person who spoke on the seniors, but the point I wanted to make is when you think of a family, and as the First Nation says, we go out and to the circle. Within the family, the young do care about the old in the middle. They care about the one that's not doing well. They care about them all. So we need to move that out, and we need to broaden, because the Tories put you in boxes, and they want you in boxes, and then they get their election that way. But what we need is the youth to understand that as seniors, we care about their education. Hey, every adult I know who's a senior and has kids, they're helping put them through school. But the other way around, we need to move the kids on, not within the family where they understand it, but within the community, that we're all one, so that we help one another. And we need to move the youth on from where they are. And I did it the other day because I was excited. I saw that Sweden does a marvelous thing as far as looking after the kids in daycare. They give the adults who are our parents, they give them 18 months instead, and then they don't have to pay for daycare for the young kids. So as I explained that to my younger family, they really excited, and then I could move them on to realize that we all have to work together, you know, so that we can do what you need. And we aren't doing that. We've still got everybody in little boxes, and we need to move them on. And I think that's a part of what you as Lead Now would be really, really good at, and you do. And I want to congratulate you on that.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm a managing director. I live in Halifax, but I happen to be out here today, so I'm really happy to get to visit with you all. To speak to that point, I think one of the things that we've seen that's so exciting about some of the work that we've done, both in some of the discussion groups, household gatherings, as well as at rallies, has been that we are able to bring out youth, and we're able to bring out seniors, and a bunch of people in the middle. And for me, living in Montreal and going to some of the events, living in Halifax, it's been really powerful to see the discussions that happen there, and to hear people afterwards saying, oh, it's so great to see so many young people. We never see young people. But also to hear the young people say, it's so great to be connecting with these older people. I didn't know that they cared about this thing that I care about. So I think that's something that we're really trying to build, and that sometimes people think of us as a super young organization, and in many ways that is true. But we have all across the generations large numbers of people who are coming together, and that's really that intergenerational aspect of the work that we do is something that I think motivates all of us a lot, and feels really exciting and powerful. So thank you so much for what you said, and we hope that we'll continue to do that, and we hope that if you are out at one of the pieces that we're doing, or in your own work, that you really take that step and to talk to the people of different ages from you, because I know sometimes it can feel a little bit intimidating or scary to talk to people that you don't know that well, perhaps especially if you're younger, and assume that if your experience is that your parents don't care about the things that you care about, or you think that they don't because they're your parents. But having those conversations opened up is really reassuring, and can spark all sorts of new thoughts and collaboration.
I'd like to, we talked a bit at the beginning about cooperation, and so I'd like to end, and we are about to end, on how you cooperate with other organizations, and how can we as an organization locally that's part of a national grassroots movement across the country, how can we support and engage with your process? Obviously some of us already do individually, but what can you say more about cooperation and working together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I touched on it a little bit in terms of our campaigns. We'll often try and find the groups that have got the issue expertise and work with them. So we do try and partner with folks as much as possible in that part of our work. And we try and make sure that if we take on an issue, we find the groups that are working on it already and even stronger than when we started. It's a bit different in the case of the Council of Canadians. I was actually, when I was setting up the slides, trying to find, I've got a bunch of photos of rallies that we've organised with people proudly holding Council of Canadians banners, and that's always great to see. So getting involved and with the events that we're organising, but I think it can go a bit deeper than that. I'd love to chat about it more. I think especially as we start to do this really serious kind of on the ground election work, getting connected to folks like yourselves that have already got established networks in the communities to try and help build that together. We, like Kamara was saying earlier, we know that us alone we're not going to shift things in the next election. But if we can work together with other groups, if we can get people organised and do that in a really cohesive way, so that we sort of build something together, I think we've got a much better chance of success. Exactly what that looks like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm hoping that's part of the conversation we can have through the online the webinar, the conference call thing that we're doing next week. But also, I'm not far away.
How do you want people to connect to that if they want to?
Yeah, you can't quite see the link. I'll see if I can pull this down.
There
There's a link there. It's actually a Y. Let's see if I can move that up. that works. There we
Yeah,
go.
we're here.
So you can write down that address and sign up, and we'll let you know. We'll let you know when it's happening. Unfortunately for that one, you need your email address. So I'm not going to